All right, good afternoon and welcome to the House Environment Committee. This afternoon, we are going to be hearing from the Agency of Natural Resources and the Pony Meadow Natural Resource Conservation District on clean water service providers. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Chris Rottler, R-O-T-T-L-E-R for the record. I work with the Watershed Planning Program in the Water Investment Division in the Department of Environmental Conservation. And my colleague, and I apologize on behalf of my colleague, Ethan Swift, he's unable to be here today. He had a last minute family emergency that came up yesterday.
Oh,
Yeah. So, but we'll see what I can do to answer your questions.
Great, thank you. Nice to meet you.
So if you're ready, I can jump in. I have a presentation for you. So I was able to listen into some of the programs that you had committee hearings last week with Councillor O'Grady and Director Kamen and Director Pete LaFlamme, and understood you're getting a little bit of a background on the Clean Water Act. A few slides is just to make connections between what you've heard and what the main discussion point is today, the Vermont Clean Water Service Providers. So the Clean Water Act, the Federal Clean Water Act has a provision related to TMDLs. And I heard Councillor O'Grady talk about TMDLs as a plan. I like to think, and they are, I like to think of TMDLs as a diet when I explain it to people who are lay people. So we have different watersheds that are impaired, and the two most prominent watersheds that we are dealing with are the Memphremagog and the Lake Champlain basins. And both of those basins are impaired for phosphorus. There are other smaller TMDLs. And here on the screen, you can see the basins. Not that we're ignoring the eastern or southwestern part of the state, but the phosphorus TMDLs are demand a response. And that's what we're working on. So here we show the basic task in front of us in Lake Champlain. We are currently loading 631 metric tons a year of phosphorus, and the diet is 418 metric tons of phosphorus that we're attempting to reduce flowing each year into the lake. And we're looking across various sectors, and we have an all-in approach to dealing with phosphorus. So agriculture, developed lands, wastewater, and natural resource sources of phosphorus are all on the table. In 2015, you passed the Vermont Clean Water Act that I understand you also had a little bit of background on. It was a big step forward in dealing with and tackling this diet that these water bodies are on. It established the Clean Water Fund, established some new regulatory programs, and jump-started and kick-started our tracking and accounting programs and reporting requirements. If you heard from my colleagues in the Clean Water Initiative program recently, the performance report recently came out, and you might have heard some testimony on that, or you will shortly, I'm sure.
You heard that yesterday.
Okay. They've done an excellent job over there. A few years after the Clean Water Act and Vermont's Clean Water Act was passed in 2019, you passed Act 76. And if you Google Act 76, you'll also find a child care law that comes up. So if you're interested in the environmental or clean water version, I always put in DEC or something like that to find it. This act did a number of things, and it established a long-term funding source, which you may have heard about, sheets from bottles and some room and meals tax is going into this funding source. It provides some assurances regarding non-regulatory targets. It opened up project operation and maintenance and provides some assurances in that area. Enhanced accounting, and created some new funding programs, including formula grants. Formula grants are grants that fund new entities called Clean Water Service Providers, or CWISPs. I didn't make up the acronym. So what is a CWISP? CWISP are semi-permanent entities that typically serve for 5-year terms. At the beginning, we created staggered terms, so some of them are shorter, some of them are longer, but eventually they'll get onto 5-year terms once you deal with that staggering. We modeled the program after the designated agencies that exist in the Agency of Human Services, the mental health nonprofits that are strong partners with the state, but clearly very separate from the state. They're mostly permanent organizations and they receive financial support through contracts and grants that are, semi-permanent. These entities are also semi-permanent. They do have standards that they have to live up to keep that status, but it's important that there's some permanence to these entities. One of the other unique things that the Clean Water Service Providers have that came about through this law is a phosphorus reduction target. So where previous grant programs would give money and say, okay, here, develop a project that benefits water quality, a Clean Water Service Provider now is given a grant that comes with a target, and that target is something they have to achieve and by the end of their term in order to achieve what's called adequate annual progress. And they must meet that standard in order to remain a QISP. The focus of the funding and these entities in particular is to address the non-regulatory part of the TMDL, of the diet. So if you think of the diet that we're on for the lakes, a big chunk of it is coming from regulatory programs. 3-acre stormwater comes to mind, some of the agricultural permitting programs that you're aware of. There is a section of the TMDL that needs to be addressed through non-regulatory or voluntarily implemented projects. So there's no requirement to implement the projects. We're trying to incentivize landowners to implement these projects on their properties. Hopefully there's a win-win. There's reasons why landowners will do it. There's reasons why they wouldn't do it. But trying to bring about projects in the non-regulatory space. And that's what these Clean Water Service Providers are focused on. That's what their funding is restricted to. Clean Water Service Providers are held to standards. They have to meet adequate annual progress. That's in the law. And we've interpreted that as both a quantitative and qualitative metric. We acknowledge the context within which Clean Water Service Providers are working. For example, at startup, things are a little bit more, there's a ramp up needed and some of the tools are not available to Clean Water Service Providers. So we do consider some of those qualitative metrics as well as the hard phosphorus target. Feedback from the community is also a part of the qualitative metric. How are they doing with establishing relationships in their community? So here's the map of Vermont again, and you can see the watershed basins, and you can see which entities are serving as clean waters. We only have Clean Water Service Providers in the Lake Champlain Basin and the Memphremagog basins at this time. We can expand the network to the other parts of the state, but the challenge with that at the moment is there are no targets. So should there be a phosphorus or a nitrogen target that gets developed, then we would attach funding to that, and then we could go look at the eastern part of the state. Until that time, we're focusing on the Lake Champlain and Memphremagog basins. So you can see there are 7 Clean Water Service Providers. There are 6 entities serving that role. The Lamoille and the Missisquoi are served by the same entity, the Northwest Regional Planning Commission. The Winooski is served by the Winooski Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission. The Northern Direct to Lake, the Basin 5, the St. Albans Bay, the Heinsberg, Shelburne Direct to Lake Basin is served by the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission. Otter Creek is served by Isaac County RPC, and South Lake is served by a partnership of the Poley Medway Natural Resource Conservation District, who you'll hear from later in the session this afternoon. My colleague Hillary is here, and then Poley Medway is in partnership with the Rutland County RPC. It's also worth mentioning that an important part of this new structure for administering funding for clean water non-regulatory projects is the Basin Water Quality Council. So each QISP has a council that has been created by statute by Act 76. So it's a 9-member board. It's not a board of governors, but they do have a policy role. It's more like a loan committee is the quick and way to, quick and easy way to describe it. And its seats are also designated by statute. So 2 seats go to a natural resource conservation district, 2 seats go to RPCs, 2 seats go to watershed organizations, 2 seats go to municipal entities in the basin, and 1 seat goes to a conservation organization like Vermont Land Trust or the Vermont River Conservancy. The BWICs vote, one of their main roles is that they vote on projects that come before the QUISP, and they also provide support during the basin planning process. So back to the big picture. The TMDL is made up of a regulatory component and a non-regulatory component. And through the all-in approach of looking at pollution from both areas, we are looking to address the TMDL requirements that are coming to us through the EPA. And here's just a slide I took from another presentation, but you can see a lot of the agricultural sector is dealt with through the required agricultural practices, but not all. There's a non-regulatory component in agriculture. There's a non-regulatory component in streams and forests and developed lands as well. And to remind you, the clean water service providers are operating on the non-regulatory side of the equation. Stole this slide from the Clean Water Initiative Program. This is from the most recent performance report. And you can see that over the years, progress has been, this is for Lake Champlain. You can see that progress is being made. There's still more work to be done. That diet is pretty big. And the green section on the graph, it's not that, if you go back to the slide before, 10% of our non-regulatory work comes from agriculture. The yellow bars are agriculture in this slide. But if you're looking at the space that the clean water service providers mostly play in, it's in the green bar. It's in the natural resources section of this chart. I'm also told to caution you that the most recent numbers for 2024 are not complete. There's a post report truing up of the data. So in the past, the numbers always dip down a little bit, and when they get finalized, they will show an increase. I'm not making any promises, but I would expect it to be higher than what's being reported just because that happens. So how are the QUISP really doing? This slide is a really good slide for you to show the progress that's been made with projects. So these are on the left, you see a graph that shows projects in the kilograms of phosphorus that they represent. These are not all projects that have been implemented. These are projects in the pipeline at various phases. As you may know, it takes a long time to develop any sort of infrastructure project. You have to work with the landowner. You have to develop relationships. You have to sign agreements. You have to get buy-in. You have to do preliminary design and engineering, and then finally you can get to final design. So some projects can be done quickly, maybe a growing season for a very simple project. But some projects that are more complicated can take 2 years. So there's lag in this also. But you can see the upward trend. These entities really didn't start the work they've been doing until 2021. And you can see the ramp up in both kilograms in projects as well as money that's being spent and committed in the various sectors across the network and across the basins. Is there a question?
I do.
Oh, Representative Austin.
Yeah, I'm just a little confused because the graph, I mean, to me, it looks like it's increasing tremendously. And like in February of 23, it looked like it was somewhat manageable, right? Is that accurate?
By manageable being
It's a lot
smaller.
less
Yes,
smaller.
yeah.
So why, I mean, we've always had farms and everything. Why is it going up?
Well, these are new entities, these clean water service providers. So they needed to establish their procurement policies, and they needed to establish relationships, and they needed to establish the basin water quality councils.
Right.
And so there was a transition also from older grants that were still on the books that were being spent down as these entities were ramping up. So there's an overlap there. So that old money was being spent first, and then people were coming to the clean water service providers. Yeah, sure.
I think she might be thinking that the graph is showing phosphorus going into the lake.
Oh.
That's the reduction in
Oh.
phosphorus going up.
Yeah, this represents, yeah, the
Sorry, thank you.
Actually, something that I've been thinking a lot about in these presentations because it is inverted and it is kind of funny because we're trying to reduce it.
yes,
And yet
Right.
graph going up is showing something good, but when you're trying to reduce something, it's a little disconnected in the brain.
understood. Yeah,
Yeah.
this is from the perspective of the program administrator looking at what the
More
are doing.
reduction
So
is better.
yes, understood.
Or negative.
But wouldn't we want it to go the other way, like where it looks.
Well, this is like, what did you say, kilograms of phosphorus or?
Yes,
So it's, yeah, we want more reduction, but it would be worth thinking about a way of doing it graphically that celebrated the success and showed reduction.
Right.
you know,
Yeah, that way.
if you showed it in context, you might see the big gap. But yes,
Yeah, Representative North.
Yes, I just had a question about the y-axis and the units, the estimated annual phosphorus reduction in kilograms. We're used to seeing things in metric ton, or million tons.
yes.
And so now we're just in kilograms. So
Yeah.
how do we translate from one to the other? It seems like if we're just measuring a kilogram, that's nothing compared to a million tons or.
Yes, a metric,
So
I think is 1,000
Peanuts,
kilograms.
yeah.
Yeah, so as I just alluded to, there's a lot of work ahead of us. There's, some projects may get 2 kilograms. Dam removal might get, I don't know, 30 kilograms, we're one project at a time, reducing phosphorus here and there.
My second question is so it says annual reductions, but yet it's shown by month. So are these like cumulative projections of how much at the end of the year you'll get?
So the Clean Water Service Providers,
What we're looking at.
sure, the Clean Water Service Providers report to us on the projects that they funded. And each of those projects has a phosphorus score attached to it. The service providers don't actually earn that credit towards their target, which they have to achieve until the project's been implemented. So the numbers in here represent both implemented projects as well as projects in their pipeline. But we receive the information and we are tracking the growth in dollars going out the door as well as the growth in projects in the pipeline. So this is just, instead of showing numbers of projects, it's translated into kilograms of phosphorus. So
Per year.
per year, that's right. So it's the loading per year. So a project might reduce 20 kilograms. It's not total, it's 20 kilograms per year.
It is interesting, but so then how do you reconcile the month at the bottom?
That's the reporting that we received historically. So in June of 2023, we had less than 200 kilograms worth of projects having been approved by the clean water service providers. At that point in time, that's what we were receiving for their projects being
I think
reported.
I'm understanding. And
Okay.
any given project is valued at a certain amount of cleanup and they just measured on a per year basis. And when that project is completed, okay, you now have successfully added your 2 kilograms to the chart. And that's 2 kilograms per year is how much that project was worth.
Exactly, thank you.
So then my question is, so does it only ever accumulate? So if once we've earned it in April of last year, that's still counted toward the total. It's just accumulating all the projects that we've ever done. Because we're assuming that that was put in place last year. It's going to get its 2 kilograms per year last year, and it's still getting its 2
It's a great
kilograms per year
question.
this year, and it just keeps accumulating.
Yes, we accumulated, we account for it once. It's the 2 kilograms and then we don't, yeah,
We don't add it again the next year.
exactly.
It counts once, but
It's still there.
It's still there.
Right.
So we're building on it this year and building on it the next year.
And that relates to the operations and maintenance component of the program. Before, we didn't really, our department's not really spend a lot on operations and maintenance, but these projects can go away, right? So meaning they can be just not cared for and then they don't function. So clean water service providers are required to provide operation operations and maintenance for every project that they fund for the design life of a project. So if a project has a 15-year design life, they have to care for it for 15 years. And then after that 15 years, it actually drops off
So we're no longer reducing the load.
that's right, unless someone can extend the life and then it can stay in the account.
Doug, maybe,
As I understand it, I think you can dive a little bit deeper into this topic with my colleague Claire Maddox, who is the tracking and accounting coordinator.
Yeah, that's a question.
Okay, so I'm more of a generalist, but that's my understanding of
we did
it.
have her back.
Okay, she's a wealth of information in that space.
Can you explain me how dam removal contributes to the reduction of?
As a generalist, I can. I'm more of a policy person, not a project person, but there is sediment that can accumulate behind a dam. My understanding is from the science of doing these projects, there's people who've done more work on this than I have. I've done no work on it. But there's some science out there that shows that there is a reduction in sediment when you remove dams.
When they remove dam, is that sediment actually removed from
But yeah,
the river altogether and trucked away?
every project's different, but you didn't, removing a dam is not like, you do not want that sediment that's backed up behind the dam to go downriver. There is usually a plan that is part of the dam removal that addresses that. Yeah, again, a little over my skis on this, but I encourage you to ask my colleagues who are more experts in that space on that. Okay. If your questions. So clean water service providers are making progress. To date, they have awarded 99 separate awards for clean water projects, 21 focused on assessment or project development, which is early phase of project, 51 focused on design, which is a step right before implementation, and 27 supporting implementation. We have 200 kilograms of phosphorus per year in implementation projects for projects that are in implementation phase for this year, state fiscal year 2024. And we have a whole bunch of other kilograms in the pipeline, as you can see, with an expected 1,133 kilograms if you look at the whole system in the pipeline.
Can you remind us, so what, excuse me, non-regulatory kind of budget is? What is the diet that we want to be on here?
That is also, I asked that question of my colleague today, and it's a little complicated because it's not, we get the pounds where we can get them. And yet, you probably heard, I think I remember hearing about the efficiency of projects. These natural resources projects are very efficient to get. In general, some of them are not. Dam removals can be expensive, for example, but a floodplain restoration or dealing with gullies or forest roads can be a much more efficient bang for the buck, dollar per pound of kilogram reduced. And this system is very good because it's target based, because we're incentivized to go for the more efficient projects. And yet, I have a ballpark number, 80-20 is regulatory versus non-regulatory, but it's not like the QISP have a target of 20%. The way the target works, and maybe this will be helpful to you, is we only expect clean water service providers to achieve a phosphorus reduction equal to the amount of money that they receive. So we have a formula that we use called the cost rate methodology that was developed also by my colleagues. And we use that formula. So when we give $2 million to a clean water service provider, that will come with a target. The formula will tell us what the target is. And let's say that's 150 kilograms worth of phosphorus. But in terms of the total amount of phosphorus for the TMDL, we have not assigned a particular target to all the clean water service providers for the non-regulatory, if that helps.
It helps, but what is the non-regulatory portion of the total reduction required?
I'd have to get back to you on that. I have to ask my colleague. Ethan Swift might know that.
No worries.
Okay. One of the complications for the program is that we do not assign a phosphorus target to a project until it's been implemented. So you can have a projected target at the design phase. You may say, oh, I'm expecting 20 kilograms from this project, but once it's on the ground, and you look at how many acres you dealt with or what actually happened with the project, you might say, oh, well, it's really 18 kilograms or it's 17 kilograms. So that can cause some, I don't know, heartache for the people who are counting phosphorus credits.
I guess
Representative Austin.
just what is the total number of phosphorus that we need to have removed?
That goes back a few slides.
Okay,
I can, so if I,
200.
was it two?
oops.
Sorry,
This is
thank
for-
you so much.
This is for the Lake Champlain Basin, and the map for Megart Basin is smaller. But you can see it is 418 metric tons of loading per year needs to be reduced
Per year.
per
I
year.
thought the Vermont reduction required is in the middle, 213.
Yes, sorry.
113 million tons.
Metric tons.
Metric tons.
It's 1,000 kilograms.
Yeah, so the budget is 418. And we're at 631.
Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
thank you.
1,000 kilograms that we've reduced as far as one metric,
Yeah,
213.
exactly. And that's why I was asking what the natural resource allocation requirement is. Guess it's in this chart.
So over the course of this program, I would describe how we're doing as making progress, but there's more work to be done. And I like to use the mantra progress, not perfection, because this is a very complicated change management initiative. And where you might do a restructuring of your any department that you might, your office that you might work in, that it's done and people have a little time to settle out. This has really been a multi-year effort. Having targets is really a new world for everyone. Our service providers, for staff in our department, as well as for the practitioners. Having the right calculators and tools for each project is a challenge. We have some science and then there's some project types that aren't available because we don't have the science on what those targets are. For example, forest roads and forest trails is something that we're doing research on, and it's a project type that we hope to be able to bring to availability for funding for the clean water service providers this year. But it's not every project type has tools available to it, so it's a limitation of the system. We have had successes. So we've issued actually 3 years of formula grant funding. Have been appropriated starting in 2021. We have robust participation in the network, the Basin Water Quality Councils, 7 basins with 9 members each. We have quite a number of our community members serving on these Basin Water Quality Councils and contributing the effort in a very community-based way. We've issued a new rule, Environmental Protection Rule 39, and we've drafted corresponding chapters of guidance to support the policy behind how these entities operate. We've made adjustments to that policy in particular areas where we've received feedback that could help provide some more efficient operations. We've made some progress in the area of operations and maintenance, which, as I mentioned, is a new area for our department and for project implementers. And we've brought operations and maintenance online as of this fiscal year. We have some new legal documents, including site access license agreements for these projects. And we are working on new project types, as I mentioned, forest roads and forest trails. And we're opening up other project types, such as strategic wood additions. So work is happening, and it's an all-in effort to address phosphorus from natural resource projects.
Were you reading though from that overview slide?
I was
You might have said all that.
paraphrasing.
Some things that, okay, but are they all on here?
No, I added to it. The forest roads and forest trails was an addition.
Great to get that updated.
Okay,
That's what we're really interested in is what the progress has been and what you're, I'd love to hear what the best, what you've learned about like the priority project areas where we're getting, a lot of reduction for the investment. What's working really well? What could we do better? Kind of a summary.
we did provide some additional information that's not in the presentation in our watershed planning program legislative report, which is supplementary to what I'm saying today, but we can certainly get you additional information as,
Or even if you just, if you added some bullets to this in what you just read. 'Cause
Sure.
I'm trying to catch up and follow,
Okay.
that would be great. Thanks.
There's a lot going on, so we couldn't add everything on the slide, but happy to add more.
Yeah.
For sure. Thank you. We often use the metaphor that we're building the boat while sailing it, or flying the plane while building it. Take your pick. We've been operating the network now for 3 years, and we're still developing new tools, as I mentioned. We've had many successes. We have stakeholder engagement increasing, and we're shifting out of older funding sources and moving into newer funding sources. We've definitely taken an adaptive management approach. We know that this is a very entrepreneurial effort because these projects are voluntary in nature. We have to work with landowners and build trust to get these projects implemented. And there are very talented people, including my colleague Hillary, are doing that good work, among others, watershed groups, conservation districts and others, regional planning commissions are doing that work. And we know that there are still barriers to the program, challenges that need attention. And one of those being bringing new project types online. The Clean Water Service Providers don't have all the tools they need to do the work that they need to do. This program is very science-based. We have to have targets based in science that can't be arbitrary. We have to know that the kilograms of phosphorus that we're attaching to a project are defensible. So we can't let any project go forward willy-nilly. We have to be able to account for the work as a responsibility to the Environmental Protection Agency. So yes, we are looking to continue building on our successes. Capacity is a challenge. If you'll know, the year that this law, that's attached to this law is 2019, and COVID happened in 2020. I think at the time that this law was brought online, there was a thought process that this was going to be a big influx of money. And then we had ARPA and we had the infrastructure law. And so there's an influx of funding that has put a lot of demands on our engineering community and our other implementers. So capacity is a challenge, both with our staff and the agency, as well as out in the landscape. We recognize a need for more phosphorus accounting methodologies, and some are being worked on as we speak. We have a contract out for private roads for doing work on private road phosphorus reduction projects to mitigate phosphorus from private roads. And as I mentioned, coming online shortly will be the forest roads and forest trails project type. There's regulatory forest road work, but this is the non-regulatory work for older sort of I would say dormant roads that are not actively being used would be the way to describe that project type. Briefly, we have done a lot of active listening. Last April, we held a summit to hear feedback from stakeholders. We've issued are working on a draft Clean Water Action Plan, which represents our priorities in the department for our time management and what we can deal with the long list of feedback we've received from our stakeholders. And it's meant to be a communication tool and a work planning tool to look at steps coming forward, in the future. And continuing to pay attention to landowners and trying to incent landowners to engage with this work, because we can't do it without them. And this is a very entrepreneurial effort, and go back to the 2015 law, the all-in mantra, and I'd love to revive that saying, because there's a lot of work ahead of us as you're identifying. There's a lot of phosphorus that needs to be reduced, and we're continuing to grow the network and grow the culture of water quality and stewardship for the lakes. So that's the role of clean water service providers and the work that's been happening.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I guess I'm curious about, I've heard that it can be hard to get people to do the projects. And is that true?
It can be. It depends on the nature of the project. Some people want to do the right thing for the lake, and some people don't want people doing anything, anything government funded on their property. Sometimes there's an alignment of interests. Maybe a project will have flood mitigation benefits and someone will be interested in that. And it just depends on the person. And also, I think relationships also matter. Some entities have a lot of credibility and they're able to build those relationships with landowners. So it's really contextual. It's hard to paint a broad brush. To say you have to get, I think, into the details of the given project, why.
I guess I'd ask, what are the kind of the barriers to getting projects done through the clean water service providers? You just listed some.
Yeah. So capacity is, I think, one of the biggest challenges at the moment. And I would also defer to my colleague Hillary, who is a clean water service provider, and you can ask her directly what her opinions are on that. From what I'm seeing from a network-wide perspective is there's quite a bit of funding in the system. There's a capacity challenge, and then there are some project types that are available to clean water service providers, but there are some that are not. So the QISPs do not have all the tools that they need to do their job. And so that's part of the dynamic. And then also working with landowners is part of it.
How do we get them tools that they need to do their job?
There are lots of theories and possibilities. I would defer to my colleagues, maybe Director Kamen to ask, or now Deputy Commissioner Kamen to answer that question. Some folks have proposed incentive payments. That's not everyone is on the same page about that, because there's some people think, people should be doing this work out of, the altruism, for the need to just do the work for the lake, because they're committed to water quality. But that's what comes to mind off the top of my head. But where I've seen projects work and where there's been success, I would say the relationship of the project implementer with the landowner is fundamental. It's fundamental. So if the landowner trusts the person who's coming there to do work with them, that can make or break a project.
And are there challenges in getting the money spent every year?
Yes, there are, because this is a new process. We are still ramping up. I'd still say we're in a soft opening, describing where we're at. We're not fully, we're not running on all of our cylinders yet, partly because of all the other funding that's out there. There's funding from the Lake Champlain Basin Program and, again, ARPA and Bill and other funding sources that is available to a lot of these implementers. But as some of these project types come online, again, I just had a meeting this morning about forest roads and forest trails with the watershed planning program. And there's a lot of excitement about this project type, and that will create just another opportunity for getting some projects implemented that hasn't been available up until now. So there is momentum. Yeah.
I'm not sure if you're the person to answer the question, but it sounds like you're talking a lot about projects on private land, but getting back to dam removal. How many dams, like in areas where of flood control dams? Some places they're owned by townships. How has that affected them? And how much can you relate to or attest to red tape being one of the reasons why you can't find contractors or you can't get a project started?
I would need to defer that question to someone who's more involved on the project end of things. There are requirements for certain projects, even though some of these projects are non-regulatory. Some of the projects do need to get permits, so a dam removal project would need to get a permit. I think one of the reasons why a dam removal project might not get implemented is not necessarily the red tape, though, is that it gets back to this cost to kilogram efficiency. So a dam removal project is a rather expensive project, and it might not have a particularly high kilogram reduction value to it, in which case it might not be as attractive to implement as a higher efficiency project. That's the biggest factor in this system, is the efficiency dynamic.
Where does public safety get into this equation? Especially if there's a damaged dam and there is a public safety issue. Is there some sort of exigent circumstance clause where somehow a project can be expedited?
I don't think this funding is targeted towards dam emergency situations. The dam safety program has a dam safety loan fund, as I'm aware, and other funding, which is more targeted to that dynamic. So this is more focused on non-emergency phosphorus reductions. So this would not be the best funding source for that situation.
Representative North.
I'd be very interested to understand the total efficiency of the QUIS process. And have you been able to calculate the total cost of a kilogram of phosphorus removal per kilogram basis using the
So the method we use to assign a target reduction value to a clean water service provider, I referenced that earlier in the presentation, it's called the cost rate methodology. And that cost rate methodology looked back at older projects, not that old, but projects that we've been implemented, that we have funded at the state, and looked at their cost as well as the associated phosphorus reduction score. And having a large sample size, we're able to do some averaging and weighting across the various sectors of work, and that's how the formula works. So we do very much look at that data, and it does play into the dynamic
value. What is the average cost to remove in total from all the planning, all of the people involved, state money, all the other money from other resources comes in? What's the total cost to remove a kilogram of phosphorus?
I can give you. I have to get back to you on the exact number, and I want to be accurate for you. But my intuition for the ballpark number is it's like 13 to 16,000 per kilogram, 13 to $16,000 as an average. And that, some projects are very expensive and some projects are very,
range, yeah.
but allow me to confirm that for you, but that's sort of my general recollection.
If I understand correctly, it's two different numbers. One is the credit you're giving, like the clean water service provider, and the money you're allocating to them. But at this point, after a couple of years of this program happening, we should also have real costs.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
Yes, and so the cost share methodology is a very complicated analysis to go through, so it's not something we can do every year. Inflation is, if you asked about complicating factors, inflation is a complicating factor. And so we do have as one of our upcoming tasks over the next year to 2 years to revise the cost rate methodology, which will account for inflation, which will likely lower targets for the same amount of money because the effect inflation has.
I'm not so much looking for a target value. I just want to say, of all the projects that have been completed, what's the total phosphorus reduction and what's the total cost up to that point? And just divide the two numbers.
Sure.
That's all I want. All right, another related question.
Okay.
Then, so included in those total costs, do Quist members, people who are running, I guess, like Quist, do they get paid? Are those paid positions or is that like,
Yes.
okay,
So the law states that a clean water service provider can use 15% of their grant for administrative costs. So the
so 50% of the state funding goes toward
yes.
administration paying people to run Quists.
So typically, the allocation is about $7 million a year, and about 15% of that is able to be used on admin.
And is the same true then for the Basin Water Quality Council members?
Those positions are paid, and they're paid from different sources. A number of these entities are what are called statutory partners. So regional planning commissions, watersheds, watershed groups under Watersheds United Vermont, and conservation districts are the three statutory partners, and they receive funding from the tactical basin planning grants. And I understand that the members from those organizations that sit on basin councils are paid for their participation from that funding. And then the other seats, I believe, are paid for by the Quist. So some municipal members don't take a stipend because they just consider it as part of their job as being a municipal member. But I think the Quist will pay as appropriate. Let's say it's a select board member, so they're not paid by the municipality. So they might get a stipend from the Quist for their work on the council, as does the conservation district.
Thank you for your presentation. It's very
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Yeah,
And I'll do my best to get back to you with questions. If I missed any, please let me know, and I'll do what I can to get answers to you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think we will take a 5-minute break and let Hillary get set up, and we'll go offline until we